When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadabji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur.
Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 96. A chaotic way through burnout while uncovering unfelt emotions during political unrest.
To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try.
Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Olga Gagarina. As a proud immigrant in Canada, Olga carved her own path from starting in banking and corporate finance to opening an international education agency to then taking a role as an international student advisor at Centennial College. She is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, advocating passionately for Canadian newcomers, future immigrants, and international students. She uses her expertise in Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, 10 plus years in international education, entrepreneurial spirit, and leadership to achieve accessible immigration advisory and ethical student recruitment and successful integration of newcomers in Canada. Olga is on a mission. She is advocating for newcomers in Canada so every immigrant story is a success story. She believes in supporting newly immigrants to Canada the opportunity for quality education and is currently working on creating a nonprofit organization with a goal to educate future immigrants before they make the decision and to newcomers upon their arrival to Canada. Well, hello, Olga. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hello, Salima. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much, Olga, for being here. It's so great to have you as a guest on the show today. And I really am grateful for your willingness to be here to tell your story today. I'm truly humbled to encounter guests like yourself who allow me basically to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw on their strength, insight, and inspiration that gets shared in this space. And Olga, it's incredibly important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma. So what do you say?
Yes, mental health is very important to me, and the stigma that surrounds health, what should be considered health, is very much a barrier. And I know it firsthand because I am a wife of a psychiatrist and I see it every day. I would like the stigma to go away, but we all know that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not a magical thing.
Right.
That we come to understand the barriers and the struggles of every single individual, because health is health. Everybody has it. And mental health is part of the overall well-being for a person. So very close to my heart what we're going to talk about today.
Right. Absolutely. And I know that, Olga, you're not actually wondering what this podcast is about, But just to really shed light on it, right? This podcast, what has been created, is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. And so the benefit of this platform, the intention of this platform serves in a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So my hopeful mission with you today, like together for both of us, is really to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, I continue to bring forward a trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. So, Olga, what is the first thing that pops into your mind when you hear the phrase the mental beauty rethink?
Oh, I appreciate you calling this exactly the phenomenon. You're probably the one who coined the notion. Mental beauty is what I want everybody to think of when we want to understand our mental state, our condition, our emotions. Mental beauty is exactly how I would put it. That's why it resonates so well with me. Mental beauty is, to me, something that everybody should explore. Everybody should see what the strengths and weaknesses of ourselves we can find in our story, in our upbringing. What are those weak points that we can grow from? What are those strengths that we can utilize once we come up with a portrait of us being a beautiful, beautiful being? Beauty is a very important value of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much into aesthetics. I like beautiful things. Who doesn't? But
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's very critical. So mental beauty is something that I strive for myself. But since I want to be surrounded by beauty, I want every single individual to be as beautiful as they can see. I want to see the beauty. I want to hear those stories, and not to judge them as, oh, well, we probably should not talk about this. Well, we probably should not see half of that portrait
Right.
because it's going to be incomplete. When you think of beauty, it's actually something you can think of a Gioconda or some beautiful landscape somebody painted. It will be incomplete if we stopped at just a sketch. It will be incomplete if we decided to paint it in half colors that we had access to. Let's be painting beautiful, colorful portraits, or bold enough portraits of ourselves and our mental well-being. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. I really love it. You know what was coming to my mind as you were articulating your perspective? Something caught my attention. You said a portrait of beauty, and it kind of made me think of like, when we look at a painting, we don't necessarily look at what part of the painting do we like, not like, what part of this is really good, not good, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
look at what part of the painting is a strength or a weakness. However, when we look at a portrait and we take a step back and really take in that painting, it's the entire being of it.
Yes.
And I feel like when you said portrait of beauty, of referring to mental beauty, it kind of made me feel like that's we're achieving. It's a nice way of putting it. Thank you. All right. So let's dive in and unpack your story. What do you say?
Let's do it. I'm
Oh,
here for that specific reason, and very open and very willing.
all right. Then let's get to it. Olga, that first question. Give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
Wife of a psychiatrist and a strategic juggler.
A wife of a psychiatrist and a strategic juggler. Say it one more time, please.
The wife of a psychiatrist and a strategic juggler.
Okay. So now this is a really intriguing title. Can you tease that title for us a little bit? I'm curious about how you've combined this title, the words of this title.
Oh, well, let me unpack that because, yes, how do you combine the two and how the two notions are related? I've been always a strategic juggler. This is who I am. I think I am a huge opportunist. When I'm open to opportunities, I'm a novelty seeker. That's how I ended up in Canada, because I thought it was just a great idea, and I convinced my family that it's going to be great. Being positive, being looking for opportunities, seeking them. And I always been like, for 25 plus years, I've been married to my beautiful spouse, who is a psychiatrist, child and adolescent psychiatrist. And this role of a wife of a psychiatrist grew on me. I've never really differentiated, or it was never really had a war, until I started answering questions from colleagues and friends and acquaintances of, oh, can we talk to your spouse? Can we talk about, we have a friend who may need your spouse's help. And I always ended up in the position that I am not the one who can help, but I am the one who can explain. And I ended up sort of differentiating for a family or a friend who is asking, who is a psychiatrist in Canada, who is a psychologist in Canada, how to see a psychiatrist, and whether there is a need for that. So that hat became from a very small royal little headpiece to a very huge Panama that I'm wearing right now. And the role is actually bigger now for me, because we ended up in our middle life crisis. That's how we decide. And by we, I mean my spouse and I. And we're juggling this notions of how come you're very well aware what mental health is, but how come you are in the position of actually being not well.
Right.
And this is a bigger deal for us now. We are going through this together. And thankfully, how all our life was, one will be limping emotionally or professionally or somehow else. And another one, my husband or myself, will be picking each other up. Like, this is what we do. It's a beautiful tandem.
Yeah, that is a great tandem. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So the time has come for you to tell us what your untold story is all about. So, give us the who, what, when, where, themes, all of it.
It's a very loaded question. Tell us your untold story. But my story will start from my recent struggles, where I all of a sudden discovered that my identity seems to be broken. And that came about in the beginning of 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And all of a sudden, I am a very much a Canadian person. That's how I identify. I just remembered that, or it came to the surface, that I am also a Russian person who was proud, or is proud, or should be proud of who I am and what the upbringing was, what the culture means. I was, and now I am not. So I was very ashamed of what's happening. I became ashamed to even mention the country that I come from. And I am in the role at the college, at the public college, where that question comes to me quite often. I'm asked, oh, what country are you from? Because I advise international students, and they're curious.
Sure. They want to know where you're from, right? That's one of the ways that they can relate with you.
Correct. So, and that's one of the tools that's how I build rapport with them. I am also very much open in saying that I am an immigrant myself, and I do know what they go through. Yes, it's been an experience of several decades, like 2 decades now, and I still feel their pains and their struggles. I understand them. It helps. It helps me in my work, but it also takes away a lot from my well-being when I need to sort of chip away a piece of me and share with someone. And now, in this new context, recently there was a 2-year anniversary of the war. I am feeling that I am very much still impacted by this. What's happening, what my country is doing, and how to reconcile is still my ongoing battle.
Right.
When the war started, and I was trying to go through what I can do for students, and especially for Ukrainians, who I felt very passionate about to help. I also felt for Russian students who could not really pay for their international education now because of the sanctions, and parents struggling to transmit the money for the education. So all of that responsibility, I took it very personally. I was growing to be very exhausted within half a year of when the war started. And in fall 2022, I was really at the end of my wits, being frustrated with the process, feeling that my college could do better, my colleagues could understand it, and hiding the very fact that I am still doing all of what I do and going above and beyond, hiding the fact that I'm doing it for a reason that I am ashamed.
You mentioned this lost sense of self. Can you say more about, can you describe what that was like for you?
Oh, yes. It's difficult to describe, put it in words. It's a very mixed bag of emotions. You can't even formulate it until you understand what exactly are you feeling. Like, I'm calling it, and I know it's shame, and that's what I always have to, it feels like I have to pronounce that I'm very ashamed of what the country is doing. I've learned a little bit, and I will get to that in a bit, that I've learned to separate myself from what the country is doing, what the political regime is doing to its own citizens and to the country they invaded. But it's a mixed bag, and to the point of hopelessness and helplessness. We know where we come from. We remember how it was and how it's done. Watching TV and media outlets didn't help, but didn't help, and trying to seek more information when it's all convoluted and hidden and actually fake or misrepresented, the propaganda. It's all of that information flow and basically clashing with your own emotions being one, remembering a few things, reading some literature. When we were in the school and when we were growing up, we knew history told one way, and now it's difficult to even accept the fact that it's now a very different story.
Right.
And is it a true story? Who knows? Because that whole perplexity and uncertainty, and still I have to come back to very deep shame, for it should not be happening. It's a pain for someone else. I'm almost about to, like, I'm tearing up now because I feel for every single person, every single Ukrainian person who is invaded, and Russians too. So I'm sorry, but it's really hard to accept the fact that seemingly brotherly nations who could coexist for several decades, all of a sudden, and it's really not all of a sudden, they had their own stories, but they were hiding it. And that's why I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak about this right now. And I encourage everybody to unpack this. Maybe my story will help, maybe how I am in a very privileged situation right now. I am not in Russia. I am not fearing or fighting for my safety. I am not at the front line how many Ukrainians are right now. I don't need to hide or cover the ears of my children so they don't hear sirens, but this is still the experience I go through, and I'm really ashamed of what's happening. I learned how to distance myself a little bit, but as you can see, it's still raw. And for as long as the war is going on, I think it's going to be like that.
Yeah, I can hear how raw and painful and all the discomfort that is coming up for you.
Yes.
By internalizing this experience of deep shame and all of the juggling of these roles, even at work, and your identity, and feeling the need to explain and pronounce different perspectives, right? I'm curious about how you suffered. Like, so tell me about, how did the shame show up in your, how did it affect you? What else did it do?
Well, it's again going back to me juggling very many things, and that's great. I enjoy it. I've been a strategic juggler, as I call it, all my life. It brought me to where I am right now, and I'm very proud of where I am. However, that ability, that need to juggle several roles, care for many people, it's been brewing up, I think. And with war, it was just the last piece where I could understand that I cannot do it anymore, because my stomach started hurting in 2022 and I just couldn't tolerate it. I thought, well, age comes to mind when you start feeling all of a sudden the organ that you've never felt before.
Right.
And now I've been sort of denying it. You know how when it comes to health and we're in the mental health, like I wasn't even considering that I was suffering mentally. Like it was emotional, but I wouldn't put it in the mental health category.
Mhm.
My stomach was hurting. I was very irritable. I was showing all kinds of unfriendliness in several aspects in my several roles. It was really brewing up.
Like, you mean you were easily irritable and showing up
Yes.
in ways that maybe you were more short or curt?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, being a trained professional, I know how to temper things, how to maintain it.
But your personality, it wasn't coming out the
Yes,
same. It like your joyful self, your
yes,
enthusiastic self, like that part was missing.
that was missing.
Okay.
You're right. I actually became someone who is both in an apologetic stance and in demanding at the same time. Like I
Mhm.
was hoping for things to go better for some students at work. We were trying to process as many visas for Ukrainians to enter. It was just I was taking so much work,
Right.
so my body stopped functioning, and I pride myself maybe shouldn't, but I pride myself on being very high functioning individual. I just stopped. I couldn't do it anymore. It's almost like when you go through the stages of grief, and we always go through those when we lose something. It's
Right.
typically how we go through first denial, and I was very much in denial for several months.
Right.
Then we bargain, like, okay, maybe I should take a pill, maybe I should, I don't know,
Right.
separate myself, do something. But again, the workload piled up, the clients were seeking help, the students were asking questions, and it was just a lot. And the family watching the news in the end of the day, trying to see watch several sources, what media outlet says what and how war is ongoing. All of those things I just bargained.
Right.
Then I was angry, and that's what was happening at work.
Okay. It also sounds like you were in a bit of survival mode as well,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Very much so.
you're aware that when I'm at work, this is the role I play. I'm high functioning here. When I'm here, I've got to show up this way. Now, it doesn't mean that traits of your personality were getting dismantled, right? Because it's a lot.
Hmm.
But it sounds like that survival mode was just kind of keeping you going. And maybe that's why that denial and bargaining and anger was so intertwined that it might have been so not obvious for you.
Agree. And wearing a facade, let's
Hmm.
say, and not saying a mask, playing a role, and again juggling those roles. Like when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, when you're in a close family circle, when you have to be standing up to some opinions in my own community, for example, when
It's exhausting. I'm sure you were using all your energy too.
all of it.
Every single role was exhausting.
It was. I agree. There was no breather. There was no opportunity to actually, when I would allow myself to say, okay, this is time for you to recharge, rest, relax. Because again, I was coming from the point of how can I relax and take care of me when there are people out fighting and fighting for freedom and safety, fighting. And that's where I had to almost no excuses to take care of myself. And all of those three stages, if you are aware of if your listeners are aware of the depression, like I went into depression, that's by the end of 2022. My stomach was to the point when I had to see a doctor. And interestingly, she asked me, how many sick days do you have? When I called her on Friday and I said, I need to do something about my stomach, she's like, how many sick days do you have? I said, well, maybe a couple of weeks. And she said, well, I will see you in that time and I will see whether we need to treat your stomach or it's the stress, it's the burnout, I'm suspecting depression. We met and she put me on the leave from work.
You mentioned that you had a phone call with her and she asked you how many.
How many days I had? Well, we met, like it was an appointment, and during that appointment, she saw me.
Okay, so she was able to identify it right away that, hey, I understand you're having all these physical symptoms, but I also see that you're stressed and burned out and there's some depression or some depressive pieces happening here. So let's resume in this many days and really see what's showing up and what's settling.
Exactly.
Is that what you mean? Okay. So that happened. And so did you see her after a few weeks?
I did. Yes, it was a very ongoing process. Like it lasted for several months. I was on leave. Unexpectedly to me, I thought, okay, I'm gonna treat my stomach and I will take a breather, like short leave. And I ended up on a short-term disability for several months. I came back to work basically half a year later.
Mm-hmm.
All this time, I was trying to accept the fact that I was not well. In the first month, once my stomach stopped hurting, it was almost like a miracle. I couldn't believe that all of this stress that I would accumulate in my mid body was actually due to the fact that that's where I was hiding it.
Right. So I'm curious. I have a question for you, Olga. So you're on this stress leave. She puts you on short-term disability. You can even see that after 1 month, hey, my stomach is feeling better. Like, wow, I can't believe it.
Yes.
At any point, did you realize that the stress leave was just what we call it? Did you realize you were experiencing burnout?
Yes.
At some point, did that occur to you that you were experiencing burnout, or did it take you a while to go, oh, okay, this is burnout?
It took me a while, yes.
Or in your mind, were you considering it just a medical leave and not even thinking of it?
It was a medical leave. It was basically the sick leave, how would employer call it. And then since there is some paperwork and confusion of how that comes up and what they would think. And yes, I during that first month or two even, I was dealing with, oh, how come Olga so well, so capable, so with so much expertise and ability to handle things, all of a sudden became unable or incapable. That was one of the things that I struggled with for a while. But this physical help, the sick leave, all of a sudden became stress leave.
Right.
But eventually it developed into mental health, short-term disability. And that continuum, I struggle with that probably still. Like I understand now, like a year later, that it was in fact a very pronounced process of how I came to terms of what I was going through.
Right.
It was a journey, I would say, realizing, okay, going from a sick stomach, being irritable and short-tempered, for example.
All those physical symptoms that you could pinpoint. But even to consider that it was a stress leave was a journey of its own before really being able to accept that, okay, this is burnout. There's a big mental health component here that I can't deny myself from seeing.
Yes.
And I also heard you say something a moment ago, how people were perceiving it, or, oh, Olga, she's always got it together. And
yes.
So do you feel like you were operating under like a hero complex and then feeling incapable or being questioned for your capability, like from these external people?
Yes, it was, this is an interesting theme in itself, when being a protector, being a mother, being a juggler, capable juggler, and all of a sudden I started losing all those balls. Let's say if you envision a circus artist, they juggle a lot, and the artistry is in being able to do that, not to fall, and it's all like somehow it happens and you catch it. And that whole portrait that I had, or in my mind, like I think I didn't even realize that I enjoyed this. I am the juggler. I like it. I stopped being one. I stopped being able to catch those balls. And I shocked many people at work that how come you always have an answer? This was my MO. I lost it. I just lost all those balls and I had to sit down. Did I fall completely? Maybe I was horizontal for a couple of months for sure. And that was the breakdown of that identity of me being able of many things, or let's say not a complete breakdown, but an adjustment that I need to add some colors to my portrait. And that's what happened.
Right.
It was a shock for many that I actually called it for my stomachache, and then next Monday didn't come to work, and that lasted for several months.
Something really interesting, we've been talking about this juggling act and how people really appreciate when we can multitask and be quick and efficient, right? And, it's interesting because there was an article that I was reading a few days ago. Now, I might not, I'm just paraphrasing, but it was this article that was talking about a few things to make sure that you don't do. And one of the things was multitasking too much, because
For
we're
sure.
talking about how when we rely on an area of a brain, really it's the prefrontal cortex, right? But
Hmm.
basically, when there's so much prefrontal function that it's like we lose the ability to focus often declines over time, right? So
Hmm.
multitasking actually impairs memory and it taxes the function of that prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
As the sapping of resources, so that normally help us form strong memories. So it's really hard for us to remember things because we're doing too many things at one time. Now, society, this is how we're conditioned, right? Oh, the technology is moving so fast. And I remember even being in university for myself. Yes, we had
Yep.
laptops and stuff, but my cell phone was more still for emergencies and some calls, but we still had landlines. Like
Yes.
there was this thing about emails was like you go to a computer and you have email.
You were not wearing it in your pocket.
I thought
Yes.
we were pretty efficient and had a lot of technology advancements at the time, which we did compared to, as every decade there's lots of changes in technology. But it's like
Yes.
we don't just have emails, and people find emails too inconvenient now, right? Now with social media and
Hmm.
a DM on one of the platforms and managing this and managing that. So there is a lot of juggling that
Yes.
people do, and it's interesting that you've been using this word juggling. And yes, you're a very capable juggler. Performing on stage doesn't matter, even if a ball bounces somewhere, somehow you are able to catch it back and still keep the beauty of that illusion going, right? That all of the balls are moving.
Yes. Yes.
When that part of your identity started to dismantle, that was
Hmm.
probably very jarring for you. I'm assuming that, like, it kind of shook you up and it might have made you feel less than. And then being questioned by your colleagues or people in your work world who could see this one identity, that's something that's really strongly identifies who you are in the workplace.
Yes.
That must have had some impact on you.
That was tough for sure. Even coming to terms that you are a human, you accepting the roles, actually working on roles that are key priorities for me, going through values,
Hmm.
the set of values of what I should prioritize that I cannot catch it all.
Hmm.
It was difficult. It took my spouse long conversations with him to maybe go and understand a few things. I was given a workbook by my therapist. I was given a workbook on perfectionism,
Hmm.
and then in the end of the leave, I was basically okay with being a workaholic.
Hmm.
The artistry of juggling a few things now started meaning more to me. It actually meant that I have a sort of an addiction to having all things under control, but being certain things, just piling things up and trying to help out of all the empathy I want to give to others, I experience towards the world in general. It was just difficult to dismantle it first and then start picking it up, because that's why it took a while. That's why I was not able to go back to work in a couple of months.
You needed the time. You needed the time to pick it apart and really understand. You had to sort through what is all of this muck? What is all of these pieces? What are all these roles that I play? What's overdeveloped? What's underdeveloped? What are all these things that I identify with? What do I want to
For
let
sure.
go of? Am I carrying on roles that are not meant to be carried by me? I'm sure there were many pieces to that exploration that you were journeying through.
Hmm. It was many pieces, and you feel like, since you are battling with the depressive state, the loss of identity, and I was mourning it, like denying it at first. Then I was bargaining, trying to maybe put it together, still manage. Then being angry of how things are, and finally The next stage, the depressive state, went for several months. While you're in this state, you cannot expect yourself that you can be, oh, let's just go through the to-do list for today. And Olga is very capable to go through those emotions, and then what can we do to the tools? What can I do today? You're not there. You just can't.
Right.
That's what I had to accept eventually. That's the last stage when it's okay to actually things to take longer. We are talking mental health. We are not used to be talking mental health.
Right.
We are not used to hearing how long it takes. We are
New
really
language.
not that familiar.
Yeah.
And this, me speaking today, Salima, you hosting the podcast, so people unpack it
Right.
and understand that it takes time.
Yeah. It takes a minimum of 21 to 30 days minimum to form a habit. Yeah, absolutely.
My last 2 months, I was doing better. I had 2 assignments given by a therapist. This week, you try to do nothing. That was the hardest assignment in my life, to do nothing. I was, what do you mean by nothing? She said, nothing. When we take self-care, it's always a to-do. Sometimes
people are told to do activities to distract themselves or to, stimulate certain parts of their brain or release certain hormones. But sometimes it's about resting. Sometimes it is about letting go. Sometimes it's just about that self-soothing feeling. Like, what do I need to feel, right? What's that comfort that I need? When you're so busy, you don't get a chance.
it was strange.
Well, it's a very foreign and novel experience because it's not something that
For sure.
you're accustomed to doing because you're a busy body, not only being a perfectionist, but like a perfect juggler, performing on stage and doing it well. But just because you can, it doesn't mean you do. And I really appreciate your therapist to challenge you and say, hey, your homework is what I want you to practice at home is doing nothing. I'm sure that must have baffled you. I'm giving your therapist a high five.
Yes, it was. I'm grateful. Well, I'm grateful for all mental health professionals. It's the incredible work that you guys are doing, and that includes my spouse, my therapist. I was grateful for my family physician who
really recognized it and was able to identify it, pinpoint it, and help you start that journey for sure.
And believe me, they are on a burnout pathway as well. Like, they are stressed. Mental health is this hidden, unsexy pandemic. And why I say unsexy is that when all the, let's say, going back to COVID, I guess, or just reminding listeners too about the COVID, how every resource possible was thrown at finding the vaccine or curing, on helping the society to deal with it and come out and deal with the infectious disease. Well, we are in the midst of this unsexy pandemic, and that's the expression my spouse used, like, because it's been ongoing for a while and we are burnt out, and their recovery and their breathing room, their self-caring tools are out there, but they don't allow themselves to start doing things for themselves. They know it.
Well, yes. I guess what you're saying is whether or not the helping professional individual is able to practice what they preach, right? So they're aware of it, they know it, but it's also about how to be able to really put oneself first, right? And really operating from that place. And so I get what you mean. I totally get it.
So yes, if I will invite, like, I would probably want to take this opportunity to invite professionals to, I know, Salima, you're running a project that will help. And I appreciate healthcare professionals and responders for what they do, but I would encourage them just to look in the mirror and see if there are any signs of maybe you need a week or so to take care of yourself. And there are plenty of resources out there. But again, when these resources, or reading through or listening to, there's no lack of those. But I find that absorbing it and actually keeping it in your head for some time, like, and not acting, not booking that week off, that's where we all know we suck, honestly, because like my husband says, well, I know I should be taking that magnesium, for example, for something, or you, Olga, know that you should be doing something for your bone health. Do we do it consistently? No. Do we actually act? No.
Really putting yourself as a priority, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will just encourage everybody to start doing as opposed to maybe absorbing and knowing it all, but not acting. This is what probably will be my
Right.
little call to action here.
So, Olga, when people come to see me for therapy, individuals are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started, some people are in the middle, and some are looking back. And some people, when I say they're getting started, like they just come with their whole life and go, okay, these are some things I've experienced and I have to unpack all of this, or, I need a starting point, but, therapy is good for me. I should do this. Like there's different personalities that show up when they're at that beginning phase.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are in the middle, meaning like they could be confronted with a particular issue that they're in the depth with and in the midst of, and it's maybe having a ripple effect on their past or other traumatic incidences that maybe they thought they've dealt with. And some people are looking back, meaning that they just want to do some personal growth. Perhaps they're getting closure on some historical events for them, or they want to develop a new sense of self. So for yourself, knowing that the journey that you've been on through working through the burnout and understanding your emotions, having been triggered by all the political unrest, where would you say that you are? Are you getting started? Are you in the middle, or are you looking back?
I think I am coming out of this middle stage because I went through quite a bit of a discovery during past year. I am still working on a few things because implementation of any good recommendation takes time. And as I just previously said, that we know what we should do. In most cases, if there is a pill, then a patient knows to take a pill. If there is some recommendation to go and meditate or maintain the schedule of meditation or the visits to the gym, because that helps, because you feel better about yourself. You can, through exercise, to lift yourself up.
Right.
It happens miraculously, but it does.
So it sounds like you're in transit
Exactly.
from the middle and at the end, like you're kind of somewhere in between there, because now you're in your implementation stage where it's like,
Correct.
I've learned things, super aware, and now I'm, going to give myself the time to cultivate the habits.
Correct. Very much. So you got it. I am in implementation stage. Certain tools like measuring or assessing what works for me.
Exactly.
I'm not seeing a therapist because we've concluded on a very good note saying that I am, again, Olga, proud, capable juggler, is able to continue on.
Right.
But looking back a little bit on that period of time, I can see that I'm very much more in tune with let's revisit.
Right.
Let's go for the week of some training. Let's retreat. That's where I know that we're booking, my spouse and I, we're booking those weekends off anything intentionally now.
Well, you're setting that intention too, right? Like to cultivate the habit. And sometimes you have to explore and experiment what things really stick, right?
Exactly.
And sometimes there are practitioners that will see you as non-compliant if you're not able to follow their suggestion. And it's not that you don't want to follow it, but if it doesn't work in your rhythm, then that's just not the right fit for you. Then you have to find another way. If someone has a hard time taking large capsules and they are supposed to take things like magnesium and other supplements, what happens is people might assume this individual is being resistant, but it's like, but if they really have like a low tolerance and they have a gag reflex, then definitely something to work on, but that's preventing them from doing this. But what about if there was like a powdered formula where they could mix it in water? Or maybe for someone else, it's like a powdered formula mixing in water is actually not easy for me when I'm on the go so much, but a pill would be fine, right? So it's about learning which one is good for you. Like if something's not working, it doesn't mean you're being resistant. It's like, well, this is not working. Identifying the obstacle with the option so we can always tweak and troubleshoot, like you and me and anyone else. And that's what we have to be open to. Even when people come to see me in therapy, sometimes we talk about a strategy and then it's not that they failed or didn't do it, but there was a struggle. So we look at, okay, well, what was getting in the way? Or, well, okay, so let's look at all the different pieces of this. And then we tweak it. And that's how we customize what's right for a person. And so each one of us have to do the same thing for our own well-being. There's no cookie cutter.
those adjustments of tools and techniques and supplements, all of those, it's all work in progress. What I've learned is it takes time. Even with pills in mental health, going back to what my spouse does, they just, even the medication could be adjusted. It's okay.
Yes. Sometimes we have to reduce a dose. We have to add a pill, take a pill away.
Very much so.
And in fact, I'm really curious, and maybe you're going to share this with me in a moment. And I know that we've talked so much about your story, and we've talked about so much of the debilitating factors and the suffering and the awareness that you've built, but a lot of the pain and, the burnout and some of the depression. So what I'm really curious about, if you could say a little bit more on how your untold story really affected your mental health. Now, I know we started to tease out shame. We've started to talk about the burnout and the depression, but maybe you can share a little bit more about your experience with depression and maybe your experience with medication.
Yes, I'm happy to, because this is one of the aspects, I think, of my mission, to let people know that, yes, you will be confused and not open to accept it at the beginning. It's not what anybody wants to accept.
Mm-hmm.
So my mental state, and the diagnosis was clinical depression, was a depression, major depressive disorder. And that's how it's diagnosed. And as a wife of a psychiatrist, as I know, and back in the day, I was really helping my spouse to run the corporation, so the billing side of things, when I was in between jobs. And before I started in international education, I was his right hand, let's say.
Right.
So I know MDD will be one of the codes that the psychiatrist will bill for. So I was not happy of that diagnosis. I was not willing to accept it. I struggled with it.
Right.
However, you can name things differently, but you can call it a stress leave, burnout leave, but it ended up being still a very pronounced depression. And I didn't want to take any pills. And let me tell you how I came to terms with this. I thought I will be able to figure it out, how to get better.
You mean you thought you could figure out a way
Without medication, go for a walk, start doing all things that I was recommended to do. But the thing is, you want to go for a walk when you can. I mean, if you are still in bed and you didn't sleep overnight because of those, that's one of the symptoms of depression. When I stopped sleeping, stomach was still hurting and I couldn't leave the bedroom. That's where it was clear to me that whatever the resistance I had towards medication,
Mm-hmm.
I need to overcome it. I was fortunate to have my spouse beside me because he would explain it.
But did you want to listen to your husband? Because I often find that people don't want to listen to their family members, even if they have so much knowledge about the decision.
So much knowledge, so much
Right.
wisdom. He had ways to explain it because he is trained to explain
Right.
things to people who have no clue what psychiatry is all about and what we're going through. But because we are on different islands shouting to each other, and I hear things and he's trying to transmit a few key messages, but I am not receiving it.
Right.
That was a struggle, but I just went what I was told. I was prescribed medication, and there was a few tweaks because one gave me migraines, and I suffer from migraines all my life, but that was a heavy hit, and there was an adjustment, and it was very small dosage because I was still, going to appointments and things like that. But my whole journey was within 6 months, from hurting physically to actually recognizing that, okay, I need to take the meds, and it started in the second month. And then I started feeling better and able. And then I became open to, okay, let me go to the gym. Let me do it once a week.
And so once you started the medication, then you were able to start having success with those daily and overall strategies, like going for your walk and meditating and having a routine and looking at your mindset and then expanding it to, okay, it doesn't just have to be a walk. I can go to the gym. I can maybe join this class. So then you could stimulate your senses in different ways because you had the stamina for it, the capacity for it. Because when you don't, when your chemicals are imbalanced, it has a hold over you. And that's probably what your husband was trying to
Explain.
to you.
Yes.
All right. So, what is the key message? What is your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
My key message will be that allowing yourself to explore all of what you're going through, like it's giving yourself time, being open-minded to help that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in a deep situation, just to speak up and just don't hide it. That's what I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and that didn't really serve me well.
Yeah.
Trying to uncover what exactly is serving you in this particular, what role are you playing? Are you in sort of hiding something, and not telling is not going to help? So be open-minded towards mental health, because it's health. Don't take mental health as something that is unworthy of time
Right.
and discussion. Consider it as a part of your health. And we've heard it. We
Right.
just, my tip will be, as for myself and for everybody else, let's start doing things. We're very knowledgeable. It's out there. Thankfully, mental health is spoken about right now.
Right.
Live your life in pursuit of mental beauty. Salima, this is a notion I come back to. Health, when it's good, we typically ignore it. Like there's nothing to worry about. We just go. When mental health comes up, it's typically then something is either derailed or going off. Let's maybe reframe that and go for the mental beauty as the state that you want to achieve. Let's start painting that portrait. It should be beautiful, and well-being is a beautiful picture. But that means acting. That means doing something. It's not just accepting and ignoring. And let's do those retreats. Let's sign up for the art therapy, or let's go for a walk and hug that tree, as silly as that may sound or seem to others. Those little actions,
Sure.
that's what I started incorporating and doing more of in my life. And I would invite everybody to join me.
Amazing. A lovely message. All right.
Mm.
So, I'm curious about what is your game changer inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story? Was there like a mantra or a quote or a book or like an event? Was there something that really spoke to you or has been impactful to you? Was there something that resonated for you maybe while you were in the journey, or maybe a resource that you're aware of now that you're like, wow, I wish that was available before?
Yeah, I can think of a few things that helped me, but what stands out is everybody knows the phrase "stop to smell the roses," right? We're in this mental beauty discussion, and that comes to mind vividly. To stop the smell the roses. Okay, roses are beautiful, but the key for me was to stop.
Yes.
So that was the phrase that I would actually use to remind myself on daily basis. And what eventually helped me to come out of this pickle, let's call it, and why I got back to work pretty quickly. And I am the passionate gardener, so my garden helped me. I actually went out and I forgot about the world, and that I was able to do in the last 2 months of my leave.
Right.
So to stop was the key message,
Right.
and then immerse in something that gives you joy. And I found that joy outside. When I was able to see friends, I started inviting them to the garden, as opposed to just, okay, let me sit at the table and just quick like meet over dinner.
Hmm.
Let's do something. Let's stop and smell those roses. Let's plant those roses. I planted a lot of trees. The stop thing and being outside, because roses are outside, that's what helped.
That was game changing for you, was stopping and being able to see what's there because you're giving yourself a chance to stop.
Yes. Yes.
And the roses and the is the representation of the garden, which is connecting to your joy, right? So that's a beautiful piece of inspiration that you've reflected on. Thank you. So, what is a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you want to give a shout out to? Who might they be?
So my shout out will be to my spouse, Dr. Ruben Gagarin, who just recently started his own YouTube channel, and that was his way of dealing with his, as he calls it, middle life crisis. And it's one of the methods that he can start expressing himself outside of his daily work when he is inpatient and outpatient clinician.
I'm sure it's very like valuable and not a lot of clinical jargon, and I'm sure it's very relatable for people, and they can understand the nuances of the different things that happen in life.
Yes, I would encourage him to continue. I would be grateful if we will get a few more listeners who would appreciate the messages he's sending.
Awesome. All right. That's great. So how can people connect with you if they would like to? How are you findable?
So I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, and I'm sure Facebook.
Amazing. All right. Well, we have all of your handles, so we'll add that to the show notes page if it's not on there already.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. So Olga, guess what?
Yes.
You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I am grateful for the opportunity. Mm-hmm. Frankly, it's probably, what can I say, can conclude my journey. I am very optimistic and forward looking right now. And Salima, I'm really grateful, because I think although you act right now as a podcast host, your expertise and your skills do come through, I guess, and shine through when you let us speak to you and let us uncover a few things and tell that untold story. So this is a beautiful opportunity, and I wish you all the best in your pursuit, and all of those new listeners and whoever decides to subscribe and actually be a very active supporter of the podcast, because we need to stick together and spread the word, because that's how it works.
It's really encouraging and heartwarming. And Olga, I also would just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the deep story shared in this space today. Your ability to share the roots of your emotional pain that led you to burnout, while you were able to detail losing your sense of identity, which was intertwined with political unrest that commenced in your home country. My goodness, your story is meant to be heard. I'm truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Thank you.
So once again, Olga, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma.
To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.